Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But KSJE is now listener-supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast.
Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I am a USA Today bestselling author of over 30 published novels. And on the episode this week, we have W. Michael Farmer, and he is going to be talking about his historical novel, Trini Come. Michael, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. I have a PhD in physics. I'm retired, and I've written something like 15 novels, plus 3 in the pipe, mostly about the Chiricahua and Mescalero Apaches. And the book that I'm referring to today is based on a true story. I lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico for about 15 years during my physics research days, which was basically about aerosols in the atmosphere. And I'm really very happy to chat with you about my work today.
Well, I am excited to have you on. I've really enjoyed reading the novel, and I really learned a lot as well. I wasn't familiar with the story. I think most people know Geronimo's name just as a historical figure, but even I grew up in this area, and I really didn't know a lot of the details, and so I found that very interesting to be able to dig into that a little bit more.
Wonderful.
Now, this is the story of Trinidad Verdin. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. And at a time when she was captured by Geronimo's band and lived among them for a couple of months. And so I'm guessing that took quite a bit of research to learn more about her story and what happened over those couple months.
Well, there is, compared to a lot of Western figures, there is relatively little known about her, except for an article that was written about her testimony, if you will, with a lieutenant who rode with Captain Lawton, who had been chasing Geronimo ever since General Miles had taken over from General Crook. And the article is really about 2 interviews that she gave within about a week after she had managed to escape from the Apaches. And there's some reference to her in some of the military reports, but it's really very scattered. The interest in her interviews was that, and the article was written primarily by Dr. Sunningson, who is and was a premier chronicler of the West, because he wanted to show the variation that you can get in the historical record. In one interview, Trini said that she had been beaten up by the Apaches and treated shamefully. And in the other interview, which was with a gentleman named J.A. Rivera, who was with the prefect, I think in Magdalena, she barely mentioned that and definitely said that she was treated reasonably. So here you had a real live person talking about their experiences a month after she had gotten away. And it didn't come out exactly the same in both cases. Some have speculated that it was probably because Captain Lawton's lieutenant, a gentleman named Finley, didn't quite understand a lot of the Spanish that was used, and Rivera had a very good knowledge of it. So she's not a super well-known character unless maybe it's in the area around Nogales, where she still has relatives who live in that area.
Well, that's really neat that you were able to bring a little bit more of her story to light. When did you first come across her story and want to write on it?
Well, I was doing a novel called The Iliad of Geronimo, which I've talked about with your predecessor, that covered the last 10 years of Geronimo's war with the White Eyes before he finally totally surrendered. Reference that I had as I was going through it, a prime reference for me as a novelist, was a book by a gentleman named Sweeney, From Cochise to Geronimo. He mentioned her being with the Apaches when they attacked a cavalry troop that was chasing him from some cliff sides. And there's actually a pen and ink drawing by Remington of one of the casualties during that shootout. Sweeney also mentions that she was with the Apaches when they were attacked by 150 Mexican paramilitary and just wiped them out. And they were so good at what they were doing that they brought Trini out and put them between Geronimo and his chief, men in Naiche, and insulted the Mexican paramilitary by saying, "Here's this child, come get her." And they basically threw down their weapons and ran. And they of course laughed at them. And seeing those two little nuggets there really made me wonder how it was that she managed to be taken captive in the first place, and how she managed to survive and ultimately get away from them. And that led me to Sunningson's piece, which was published by the Arizona Historical Society.
Oh, so really just outside of your more extensive research on Geronimo and his life, the mentions and the resources on Trini's story seem like they were fairly small.
Yes, that's right. She had a great-great-granddaughter who, I think in the 90s, wrote a historical piece as a junior historian about her great-great-grandmother. But try as I might, I couldn't find it. And I went ahead and wrote the piece without it. I've since been in touch with the great-great-grandson, who is a professional photographer of desert plant life. And I sent him an early review copy of the book, and he seemed to be quite pleased with it, and said, in fact, that he had long heard of his great-great-grandmother, but he really didn't know that much about her. And so I was happy to at least give them some idea about what she might have been like.
What a neat experience for them to be able to get to know her and her story through your novel a little bit more. I think that's pretty fascinating, probably for them to read and get a glimpse of her life and who she was, as well as know that her story is being shared now with a wider audience.
Yes, I hope so.
Now, with the research and there not being a lot to go off of, I imagine that you had to take a little bit of license here and there to fill in some of those gaps of her story, of things that maybe weren't discussed in depth or really documented in any way. So how did you go about that process?
Well, studying Geronimo and his personality and the way that he fought led, at least in a wartime sense, the band that he was with. That helped a lot, because there are a lot of blank spaces historically in the story about Trinidad. Like it's known that Geronimo and about 5 others plus Trinidad split off for a while from the chief of the band, again Naiche, wanted to sneak into the United States, go up to Fort Apache and try to find out what had been done with their families, and just who this new leader was that they would have to deal with rather than General Crook. And the only thing that we know is that Geronimo led them out into the western part of the Sonoran Desert. And why he went there, nobody really knows. I think Trini impressed him while they were wandering around out there, because he mentioned that she never complained and carried her share of the load. And so there's this big blank space, and I had to create a reason for them going into the desert. And knowing Geronimo, he would have gone into that desert to lead someone who was chasing him in order to ambush them and get rid of them. And so I wound up having to create the Vaqueros who were after Apache Hare. And in fact, there were Vaqueros who were after Apache Hare, but there's no record that this actually happened with when Trini was with them. But the young man that she became friends with, he was definitely there, and so it was kind of natural to create a little drama and tension with bad guys, quote, quote, giving chase to them. And there were lots of opportunities for other stories for which there is no historical record. Of course, a novelist, that's the kind of thing that he looks for when he writes historical fiction, because he has to fill in the cracks between the facts.
Absolutely. And especially, I think, in something that you don't have a lot to go off of. A lot of these instances weren't well documented during that time period and in the Southwest. But I really enjoyed the way that you filled in those gaps and created a really cohesive and consistent story throughout the book. I thought everything flowed really well. And I wouldn't initially know, which parts had to be filled in and which didn't.
Yeah, well, that's part of the art,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wanted to ask you, too, about developing Trinidad's character. Because, like you said, you have the interviews and maybe a few bits and pieces otherwise to get a sense of who she was. How did you go about developing her overall character and her personality in instances where maybe you didn't have some of those records to go off of?
Yeah, but that's a good question. If you think about it, though, it's really not that hard. Here's a young girl. She lives on a ranch, so she has to be pretty much an independent thinker in any case. And she is captured by people that she has only heard about. She's never really known any Apaches. And all the stories that she's heard is that they are the worst kinds of murders and tortures and what have you. And she is determined to survive and ultimately get away. And so the thing that really kind of latches her personality together is the fact that she wanted to live. And when she was rescued, Captain Lawton, who was aware of the raid on her aunt and uncle's ranch, told her that, frankly, everybody thought that she had been killed and left in a ditch somewhere by the Apaches. The reason that she survived was that she basically did what they told her to, and the fact that she did more than what they asked. She had to do more than what they asked for them to become as fond of her as they were. The scene where Geronimo is trying to escape with her on the back of a horse and the horse stumbles is historically documented. But the idea that he expected her to come with him says that he had really developed a pretty deep respect and attraction for her. And I would speculate that he was in his 60s then, but I would speculate that he was even thinking about making her one of his wives, because she had worked hard, she got along with people, and she had to have been learning some Apache. How she did that, I wound up using the boy who was about her age as her teacher, and she in turn was teaching him Spanish. And so just the ability to survive in the wilderness with very little, with people that she had been taught would kill her at just about any time, and the drive to get away from it, I think really frames the kind of personality that she would had to have had to make it as long as she did.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think that would be an interesting exercise for writers to take a situation and maybe be given just a couple of points of personality and then build from there. I think developing those characters in a story is such an important part of engaging the reader. And
Yeah.
I thought you did a really nice job of that, of bringing Trinidad to life.
Thank you.
And what you mentioned before of her forging that connection with Geronimo and with some of the other Apaches in the band brought up an interesting idea or interesting concept as I was reading of how you were able to balance her notions that she had of who the Apache were before she ever encountered them, and then her experiences while living with them for those 2 months. And you delve into that in the story, kind of that back and forth that she experiences of, yes, she wants to survive and escape, but she did make friends with some of the people. You know, she developed that bond. And I thought that was an interesting aspect of the story that you brought up.
Yeah, I really think that for her to have been able to last as long and as well as she did, she just about had to do that. I think she was probably what saved her life over time was the relationship that she had with the boy Garditha and the wife of Geronimo, Shiga. She treated, I think, Trini as a slave for a while, but Trini was always doing more than what she asked, and they really became friendly with each other. And when she was put to the test, like when she had to do that very long run where they basically ran off and left her, and she had an opportunity to escape then, except that Shiga had sent the boy Garditha back to kind of guide her along. All of that really winds up, being a bonding experience. You begin to see, at least in the novel, the way that Shiga saw that she was a hard worker and fearless in a lot of things. Made her new clothes, made her new moccasins to wear, so that she wasn't really as bad off as you might think after a while, because she had gone out in the wilderness with the clothes that she was wearing when she was taken captive. 2 weeks of that, and they would probably be torn to shreds, with all the stuff that she had to do. And so there are several scenes in there where the Apaches really go out of their way to help her, and I think she really bonded with Geronimo's wife at the time, Shiga.
Yeah, I would think building those bonds really showed a lot of her personality. And it seems like she must have been a very smart, very aware young woman to recognize that, if she was going to survive with this group, that becoming part of it was going to be the best way to do that until she could make her escape.
Yeah, I really don't think that she consciously did that. I think that was just part of her personality and her desire to survive. And the best way to survive was to become part of the group and learn about them all that she could.
I'm sure living out in that time period and that really kind of a rough existence, that those survival instincts were what kept a lot of people alive, probably.
Yeah, it's true. I have a writer friend who lives in Wilcox, Arizona. She's a widow and lives way out on the edge of the playa down there. And she read the book and said that the story really stayed on her mind for a good while, because she could just imagine how hard life must have been for Trinidad and how she managed to survive as well as and as long as she did. I think the way that she did that or had to have done that is a real testament to the power of her personality.
Yeah, I would agree. It kind of brings up that harsh environment. One of the other things I noticed about the book is that you really didn't shy away from some of the more difficult things to write about and discuss, some of the violence. The book opens with a very violent encounter, but even throughout, like, you really took on some of those more difficult topics historically, culturally. And so I just wanted to ask you, how you approached some of those things that can be very sensitive.
Before I really wrote much about the Apaches, I bought a classic reference. It's Apache Lifeway by Morris Opler that just talks about their culture and what their customs were and how they thought about things. And so the way that they fought, for example, was give no quarter and take none. And when the children who were taught almost from the time they were off their cradle boards to be quiet and how to use toy weapons, which eventually evolved into the real thing for them. And when they got to about 8 or 9 years old, the girls who played with the boys stopped pretty much doing that. And by the time they were about 12 years old, they were really separated. And I knew that was one of the things that Geronimo would pick up on, was her friendship with the young boy. And the Apaches were, I want to say moral, but that's not quite the word. The women were very chaste, probably the most chaste in any of the tribes in the Southwest. And so and it was a big thing for the Apaches to have a girl become a woman, i.e., when she went through her menarche, they celebrated it. That was a big thing for them. And so here was this young girl right at the age when they expected that she might become a woman and go through the ceremonies they had for it, and which if you go to Mescalero in New Mexico, you'll see at least part of that ceremony. But here was Trinidad, who really hadn't been exposed to that kind of thing yet. And so I had to figure out how it was that she might be treated. And that was another reason for her becoming close friends with Geronimo's wife. In fact, I think they actually wanted to adopt her as a daughter. But telling that tale, I really had to spend quite a bit of time thinking about how to do that without getting off in the weeds somewhere and not really saying anything at all, because as I say, it was a very important time to the Apaches, and they were very open about it. There's even a historical record of when a large number of them escaped from the Fort Apache reservation. They were being chased by soldiers. And a girl with them had her menarche, and they actually stopped. They were running, and they actually stopped. It took several hours to have a short ceremony to celebrate it. And that's such a different cultural norm from what we have these days. And I thought it was a story worth telling.
Absolutely. I think it's really neat that you took the time to better understand the culture and their cultural norms in the process of telling this story. Well, and Michael, we are just about out of time, but I wanted to thank you so much for coming on and talking about this and sharing more of Trinidad's story. I think it's a really fascinating story. And for people who are interested in reading and grabbing a copy, the name of the book is Trini, Geronimo's Captivity of Trinidad Verdin. And it's again by W. Michael Farmer. And Michael, where can people reach out and find you if they'd like to learn more or see what else you're working on?
Yeah, my website is wmichaelfarmer.com. And it has a listing of all my books and some of the media exposure that I've had. But you can get just about everything that I've done off of Amazon and Barnes and Noble and other bookstores as far as that goes. I'm working on a book about Apache Kid now, the real historical Apache Kid.
That sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
But I'm very appreciative of you having the interest that you had in Trini.
I really enjoyed the book and definitely recommend it. And thank you again for coming on, Michael.
Thanks very much.
Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.